So in my previous videos on different transition word categories, I focused on one category at a time. And thinking back on it, I'm realizing that, well, that kind of kills the suspense, right? Because if we know that all of the examples we're looking at have to do with contrast or addition or similarity, you kind of know what the answer is going to be on each question. And so what I'm doing here is mixing together a few different categories, specifically cause and effect. So words like therefore, accordingly, as a result, hence, thus, consequently. Okay, so that's one category. Emphasis, so indeed and in fact are going to be the two main ones in that category. And what I would call concession, words like admittedly, granted, and that said. None of those involve contrast, so we could say that they have that in common, but they're still different from each other, and we want to be able to distinguish which is which. And so we're going to look at 4 examples of items from those different categories and see how we can tell them apart. And we'll start with this one here. So it says, the Amazon rainforest is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, containing millions of species of plants and animals. Blank, scientists have discovered hundreds of new species in the region over the past decade, further highlighting its ecological richness. So we've got 2 sentences, and how could we characterize the relationship between them? Well, a lot of times you can characterize the first one by saying it's making a point. It's making a point, but then how does the second sentence relate to that? They've discovered more species, further highlighting its ecological richness or diversity. So they're making a point, and then they're emphasizing or amplifying that point. So emphasizing / amplifying that point. So that means the relationship here is one of point and emphasis, and that means we want indeed. Indeed. So it's not cause and effect, which would lead us to pick therefore. It's definitely not a contrast, and they're not giving a specific example to illustrate the point made in the first sentence. So our second one. So optical illusions often trick the brain into perceiving motion in static images, as seen in works of art like the famous rotating snakes illusion. Blank, many viewers mistakenly believe these effects are caused by the images physically moving when they are actually the result of cognitive processing in the visual cortex. Okay, so again, we can say somewhat generically of our first sentence that it's making a point. It's making a point. How does the second sentence relate to that? Well, if the point of the first sentence is that optical illusions trick the brain into perceiving motion in static images, so the images are actually static, not moving, the brain perceives them as moving, and the second sentence is saying many viewers mistakenly believe these effects are caused by the images physically moving. Okay, so we can get a little more specific and say that's not just a generic point, that is a cause, and what we have in this second sentence is an effect. What is the cause? More specifically, it's the trickiness here, the trickiness of the illusion, and the effect is the mistaken belief. So cause, effect, we need something from that category. Could have been therefore, could have been consequently, could have been accordingly, could have been thus. You can go online and find places where they're going to make a distinction between hence and thus and therefore. And those distinctions exist, but we're not worried at all about those on the SAT. It's all about the category that the word belongs to, because they're not going to make you choose between 2 words from the same category. So hence is good enough here. That's our correct answer. Okay. A third example. A 2022 study of bird migration patterns analyzed the role of temperature in influencing the timing of seasonal migrations. The study found that the warmer the average temperature in a region, the earlier the birds began migrating. So, since we have 2 sentences before the blank, we really want to focus on this one, the one directly preceding the blank. And so what is that sentence doing? Again, we can say it's making a point, but we can get a little bit more specific and say, well, what is that point? It's that temperature goes up, migration happens earlier. It's hard to really put an up or down arrow with earlier. So we're just going to say that leads to that. Okay, how does the second sentence relate to that? The correlation between migration timing and temperature was weaker than that between migration timing and another factor studied, food availability. Okay, so stepping back here, the role of temperature in influencing the timing of seasonal migrations. So they arrived at this finding. So again, we could say it's a point, but I'm going to say it's a finding. It's a finding that came from their study. But then we've got another finding that sort of outweighs the first one. Another finding that is actually stronger than the first one. Okay, so this is not a cause and effect relationship. What is it? This is going to be an example of what I would call concession. So granted, admittedly, or that said. What is going on here? They're saying, yes, they found this, but they're turning around and admitting that that correlation, that relationship isn't as strong as this other finding. So we don't want to say it's a cause and effect. We're not emphasizing and we're not rewording. So granted, and again, the ones that go with granted, admittedly, that said, that being said. Those are the main ones that fall into that category. And then one last example here. So it says, the ancient city of Troy was long thought to be purely mythical, existing only in the pages of Homer's Iliad. And that should probably be italicized. In any event, it says, but archaeological excavations in the 19th and 20th centuries uncovered ruins in modern-day Turkey that match many descriptions of the city in the epic poem. And again, we can use our generic terminology and say, that's making a point, that's making a point. And then what follows from that? The claim that Troy never existed is no longer widely accepted. So the point having to do with this evidence, I guess we could say, we can be more specific and say that's the cause and this is the effect. So the cause is the uncovering of this evidence. The effect is this change in opinion, the idea that, this claim that Troy never existed is no longer widely accepted. So since we do have a cause and effect relationship there, we do want something from that category. So meanwhile would mean we're talking about two things that happen at the same time. That would mean that we're giving an example to support a previous claim, and however indicates a contrast. And so 4 examples here, 2 of them, our correct answer comes from the cause and effect category, 1 of them from the concession category, and then 1 from the emphasis category. So any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I can do follow-ups on 1 or more of these transition word categories.